focus on what matters.
Welcome to the Immigration Briefing virtual event. I'm Stef Kight, politics reporter at Axios, and I'm coming to you from Arlington, Virginia. Thank you to Carnegie Corporation of New York for making this event possible. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and at Axios.com. Join the conversation today on Twitter with @Axios and hashtag Axios events. Over the next 30 minutes, we will dive into the status of bipartisan immigration reform, as well as the latest on refugee resettlement policies. Our first guest is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez, joining us from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Senator.
Good to be with you.
You have been a key player on immigration on the Hill, from sponsoring President Biden's sweeping U.S. Citizenship Act to working across the aisle, trying to find compromise on immigration. But lately, you've been among those pushing to include pathways to citizenship to be included in the latest reconciliation package. Of course, the Senate parliamentarian has struck down plans twice, the first of which would have provided green cards to Dreamers, TPS holders, essential workers, other undocumented immigrants. But we've been hearing that you are planning to go back with a plan C. Would you kind of walk me through this process and give us some insight into what this third plan is going to look like?
Well, we haven't finalized it yet as we speak, but Plan C would probably be a parole option. It would give about 8 million of the 11 million undocumented immigrants who meet certain requirements the ability to work lawfully, to have a status that would last for 5 years and would be renewable for another 5 years, that would protect them from deportation, that would allow them to travel domestically and internationally. Many of them have not seen their families for years, and that could also potentially gain access to healthcare coverage. These are some of the elements that we're considering. We're in some very deep conversations with the pro-immigration advocacy groups to figure out exactly what our presentation will be to the parliamentarian, but I think it will be somewhere along these lines.
You said it's not finalized at this point, but do you have a sense of the timing around this? When are you hoping to get this in front of the parliamentarians so we have an answer?
I would hope that we would get an informal presentation to the parliamentarian either towards the end of this week, but if not, certainly next week. And this is the way that we have pursued the parliamentarian on the first two plans. And I must say that I was deeply disappointed, and I disagree with the parliamentarian's decisions on both of those options. But that's the process that we've had. It's the process that we'll follow for what we call Plan C. I hope that she will find her way to say yes this time, but we will not accept no as an answer at the end of the day.
And what makes this plan more likely to get her approval? Are you more hopeful this time around that you will finally get a yes, or given the past two attempts, are you concerned that you'll get another no?
Well, we have read her opinions on the first and second round. And while we disagree with it, we think that this particular option falls in line with some of the concerns that she has had. She has said that granting a pathway to citizenship as a action in reconciliation is beyond the realm of what is permissible in reconciliation. She has made the concern that a status that is given that could be taken away would be something outside of the scope of reconciliation. So we think that this somehow, from our perspective, meets the criteria. This isn't a pathway to citizenship. It is for a defined period of time. So we think it circumvents, or I should say, meets the standards she herself has set. But we're, certainly I'm concerned that she may say no again. But I think we're foursquare within the essence of her own decision, and we'll see if she agrees with us. I hope she will.
Yeah. So the people watching this event were able to submit questions ahead of time, and I was reading through them, and a lot of them pointed out how often attempts to pass immigration reform or pathways to citizenship have died on the Hill. And so would love for you to answer their questions of realistically, what is the most viable way to pass bipartisan legislation at this point?
Well, bipartisan legislation, I don't think we can pass it at this point. We had over 10 meetings with Republican senators who said that they were open to consider some form of immigration reform, and they were at length meetings. And the bottom line is that there really wasn't a pathway forward with them in terms of anything that would be meaningful to the immigrant community. And those who are their families, who many are U.S. citizens and permanent residents, but can't adjust the status of their loved one under existing law. So there's no pathway there. That's why I truly believe that reconciliation is the only pathway for some broad-based pathway towards some type of status for undocumented immigrants in the country. And without reconciliation, and without Republican support in an evenly divided Senate, I don't see how that pathway would be possible. That's why we're putting so much effort into this. And unfortunately, we're doing it with Democrats alone because we can't get Republicans to join us.
Or you mentioned that it's the only way for broader immigration and pathways to citizenship or help for a broader group of immigrants. Are there more limited bills or pieces of legislation that Democrats probably would want more from, but would be willing, and you would be willing to come to agreement on, whether it's just Dreamers, for example? That's one that's typically gotten more Republican backing.
Well, even when we had our meetings with these Republican senators, I never counted 10 Republican senators who were willing to vote even for Dreamers. And that's the problem. The reality also is when you talk to Dreamers, they will tell you, yes, they want to finally have their dream come true and have their status adjusted, but they don't want to leave their parents behind. So I'm not so Solomonic to decide that I can accept, a status for one group and not for others when they themselves reject that proposition. And when we can't count 10 Republican votes to join us, even for that limited proposal.
Wow. So in addition to dealing with this situation, working on including pathways to citizenship, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, you've also been involved on the issue of Afghanistan, which has also had an impact on the U.S. immigration system. I wanted to ask you if there is any update on whether Secretary Austin will testify about the military withdrawal from Afghanistan, and have you felt the administration has been willing to provide more information on what happened?
Well, we are in conversations with the Secretary's office to get him to come before the committee. As I have said, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is one of the national security committees. We are the committee that votes on the authorization for the use of military force if it's needed somewhere by an administration in the world. We are the committee that has jurisdiction over arms sales, and I could go through a whole host of things. So there's definitely a basis to have the Secretary of Defense come brief us, come testify before us. So I'm hoping we'll get there. As it relates to the broader Afghan situation, we have been in conversations with the administration, with the National Security Council, with the State Department about what we're doing as it relates to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, special immigrant visa potential holders. And I recently came from a trip abroad where I visited Qatar that has been playing an enormously positive role in this regard. And we think we will be able to get many more people out and hopefully adjusted.
Awesome. I wanted to include one more immigration topic, and this was another question that one of our attendees submitted ahead of time. And they asked, why are Haitians being deported while Afghans are being fully accommodated to resettle in the U.S.? Congress, of course, acted to ensure that Afghans had better benefits when they were brought to the U.S.? Should Congress be doing more to support Haitian asylum seekers?
Well, I strongly criticize the administration's actions on the Haitians at the border. I have taken a very clear position that a refugee is a refugee, and you need to give them the opportunity to make their case under our asylum laws. And so it should not differentiate between an Afghan or a Haitian. And lastly, we need to work on creating stability and economic opportunity and security in Haiti, or we will have thousands more who will seek to come to the United States. That's the core issue.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Senator. I really appreciated this conversation and your time. Thank you.
Good talking to you.
Next, we have a video from our sponsor, the Carnegie Corporation of New York.
Since 1911, Carnegie Corporation of New York has invested in knowledge that inspires informed action in democracy, education, and international peace. We make grants that support research and discussion, civics and humanities, voting and immigration, global cooperation and nuclear security, and education and teaching. Learn more at carnegie.org.
Our final guests are Nazanin Ash, the CEO of Welcome.us, and Cecilia Muñoz, former director of the White House Domestic Policy Council under President Obama and co-founder of Welcome.us. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you, Stef.
So welcome. Yeah, we'll jump right in. Welcome.us launched a little over a month ago, and it was notably backed by Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton. And it created a central place for Americans who wanted to get involved or donate time or money toward helping vulnerable Afghans who are being brought to the U.S. and resettled here. I want to start with you, Nazanin. Could you just provide us some stats on what has been accomplished so far through Welcome.us? How much funds have been brought in? Where have they gone? Who all has gotten involved?
Well, and I'm really going to also involve my co-chair, Cecilia, in this conversation too, because so much of Welcome's launch was a credit to her leadership, and co-chair Bridge, who's also John Bridgeland, who's served as the domestic policy advisor under President Bush. So it's been this extraordinary bipartisan effort, bringing bipartisan leadership together, and an extraordinary partnership with the two of them that led to a really successful launch. Cecilia, you should come in and talk about that launch. You led so much of it.
Well, we're grateful to you, Naz, for really leading the charge. We've created a whole system through which regular Americans can connect to the process of resettling the people coming from Afghanistan. There's multiple parts to this, including a welcome fund. So regular folks and some large-scale donors have donated. We've raised more than $7 million that will go to community-based groups, to local efforts that are helping to resettle Afghans. And then there are multiple other dimensions of ways that people connect. In addition to donating, people can volunteer. There are ways that the refugee resettlement organizations can list the needs that they have, and local businesses can look them up to help meet those needs. You'll be able to donate frequent flyer miles to help make sure that the folks who are arriving don't arrive with debt because of the cost of travel. So there are multiple ways that regular Americans can engage in the process of helping our new neighbors from Afghanistan.
And that's one of the best ways to describe the success so far, is creating this forum where so many Americans, and describing those Americans writ large, right? So the Afghan diaspora groups, veterans groups, the private sector, other parts of the American tapestry, creating a place where they can all contribute and find a way to assist in welcoming and integrating our new Afghan neighbors. And what I was deeply inspired by with the launch of Welcome.us was the incredible cross-section of America that came together to launch it, like really united in common purpose, and establishing that place where we all can come together in that common purpose really lies at the heart of Welcome.us's mission.
Awesome. That's really cool. Immigration is never simple in the US. Refugee resettlement is never simple. But when it came to the Afghan population in particular, there were unique challenges. There are unique challenges in making sure that they can come here, that they are cared for. We'll start with Cecilia, but both of you are welcome to answer. Could you kind of walk through what made it so difficult to make sure the US could really care for our allies who were in Afghanistan and trying to come here?
Well, once folks were evacuated, folks are in military bases overseas and then will be coming in and have started to come to start new lives in the US. We have a long history and tradition of helping newcomers resettle, particularly people in times of great need. I think we are kind of at our best when we're doing that. Have been proud of the moments when we've helped, for example, the Vietnamese come to the United States after the Vietnam War, or Cuban Americans who were fleeing the Castro regime. In this case, we have a lot of people coming at once at a time when the refugee resettlement organizations were really decimated over the last 5 years. So they are both ramping up at a time when there is a significant need. And so the point of Welcome.us is to make sure that we can engage regular people in the process of helping to make that happen. And I like to think that this is as much about us Americans as welcomers as it is about the people from Afghanistan and the particular needs that they have at this moment. This is really an opportunity for us to rise to the occasion because that's what we do when we're at our best in this country.
Yeah, I add Stef.
Go ahead.
Well, just to say, beginning, just to answer the question you raised too about to put some color on the challenge. There's so many aspects of this response that are extraordinary, beginning with the volume of people who were evacuated from Afghanistan, the standing up of military bases overseas where they could be screened and vetted, and then the standing up of safe havens across the United States here on military bases where they can be initially received. And then as Cecilia was talking about, really assisting resettlement agencies who are and other community organizations and Afghan diaspora groups who are on the front lines of this response. You have to consider that resettlement agencies together resettled just over 10,000 refugees in all of last year. And now they're being called upon to help resettle almost 10 times that number in a much shorter time frame. And so it just creates this opportunity for Americans to come together and support them and support other frontline organizations with what is both an extraordinary challenge, but as Cecilia has articulated, also an extraordinary opportunity and when we're at our best.
Yeah, just to put some numbers on that challenge, as of Tuesday, approximately 75,000 people had arrived in the US from Afghanistan, and 89% of them were SIV holders and applicants and other vulnerable Afghans. That's according to data from the Department of Homeland Security. And there are still 55,000 people currently at military sites. Is that slower than anticipated in making sure these people are not just held in military sites, but actually able to restart their lives? And maybe starting with Nazanin, could you talk through why that's maybe going slower and some of the particular challenges with that?
Well, I think it has everything to do with the challenges that we were just talking about, right? The speed and scale at which people are arriving and the confrontation of that with a refugee resettlement system that was decimated over the last 5 years. So I actually think the extraordinary part of the story is how quickly America has responded and how rapidly people are being received and welcomed in their new communities. There's undoubtedly challenges associated with that, but we have seen Americans from all corners step up to respond to those challenges. So where we've seen housing constraints, we've seen Airbnb, launch a call to their hosts, and we'll be excited to support that with a call to all Americans to open their homes and provide housing to Afghan refugees. We've seen so many U.S. companies come forward and with offers of employment at a time when there's such a demand for workers in so many industries. We've seen companies like Uber step up with transportation credits. I mean, there's so many ways in which, as these challenges are being surfaced, American institutions and the American public are stepping up to offer solutions. And that's what Welcome.us is here to do, to encourage and organize and coordinate and make responsive those solutions to the needs of this population and to the frontline organizations assisting them.
Would you say those are the two biggest challenges, is housing and occupation, finding jobs for people, finding a place for them to live and a place for them to work?
I think the two biggest challenges are housing and staffing. So everything from, making sure that refugees get a warm welcome at the airport, making sure that their apartments are set up to receive them, making sure that there's a home cooked meal in their first apartment in their first evening in their new country, making in their new neighborhood, making sure that, there is someone to help them navigate a very new environment. What's the public transportation system? What's the school system? How do you get your kids enrolled? What are the community organizations that are here to support you? Like, how, all of that navigation. I was talking to actually a fellow, a former a former colleague of mine from the International Rescue Committee, where I was where I was most recently employed before I joined Welcome.us, who was among those that were evacuated from Afghanistan. And she was talking about how, it's just so important to know where to go to get a coffee and how to order one, and all the different ways that Americans can be involved in welcoming and addressing those, there's the small challenges that are so much a part of how to make someone feel welcome and navigate a very new life in a new country.
Yeah. Cecilia, I want to move on a little bit. You both have mentioned that the refugee agencies have really struggled over the past 5 years. President Biden recently announced that he would be setting the refugee cap for this current fiscal year at 125,000. Of course, in fiscal year 2021, we fell far short of the cap that Biden had set. Is it really possible to reach 125,000 this year? And what needs to be done to accomplish that?
Yeah, there are certainly challenges, mostly in the infrastructure in the refugee resettlement community, as Naz has done such a good job of pointing out. But yes, of course, this is possible. This is the United States of America. But it will help tremendously, and this is very much in our sights, if we're able to mobilize in support of the agencies who know how to do this and do this well, and frankly capitalize on the enthusiasm that we're seeing across the country to support the folks who are coming from Afghanistan. I mean, I think Americans generally understand that the people we evacuated are people who stood with us, who stood with our troops. It's so encouraging to see the veterans organizations, for example, 25 of them have signed up to be part of this effort. And a recent survey by Blue Star Families found that nearly half of the veterans that they surveyed have already taken some kind of action in support of Afghan refugees. That's the kind of energy and excitement that we want to mobilize, first in support of this population, because we're in a moment of need now, but also in support of newcomers coming from elsewhere, from around the world. This is who we are as Americans. This is what we do when we're at our best, and we benefit enormously from these kinds of acts of generosity. It's not just what we accomplish for the people who are coming, although all by itself that is important and wonderful. Frankly, it's something that we also accomplish for ourselves. And so we are hopeful that we can turn this Welcome.us initiative into something that's broader, that starts with resettlement of this particular population in this moment of need, but expands over time to include newcomers of all kinds, refugees from other parts of the world, people who are seeking asylum at our borders. This is something that, again, is our tradition in the United States. And we will do much better in facing our challenges if we remember how to step up. And this is something that it's just a joy to watch happening all over the country.
Well, I look forward to seeing the future of Welcome.us. And I could continue talking to you all for much longer, but in Axios smart brevity fashion, I have to end it here. Thank you both for joining Axios today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having us.
Next, we have a second video from our sponsor.
Carnegie Corporation of New York, investing since 1911 in knowledge that inspires informed action in democracy, education, and international peace. We strengthen U.S. democracy by supporting work on the census, citizenship, immigration, and voting, so that we can foster a fair, diverse, and vibrant democracy that welcomes and offers opportunities to all. Learn more at carnegie.org.
Thank you all for joining this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter, faster. Thank you to our sponsor, Carnegie Corporation of New York, for making this event possible. For more info on congressional updates and news on immigration, sign up for the Axios Sneak Peek newsletter at axios.com/newsletters or join us on the Axios app. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on axios.com.